Okay, so if you saw our video that we made a few days ago talking about Jonathan Quick and the potential of the LA Kings trading him based off of the opinions of NHL scouts that were surveyed in Craig Custance's Athletic article, you kinda know the material we're pulling this idea from here today. We're taking a look at Craig Custance's recent article on The Athletic where he asks NHL agents who are the most likely players in the NHL who could probably see themselves on the trade block in a very legitimate way. Quick's name was indeed on that list, which is why we made the video earlier a few days ago. And before anybody asks, no, I don't want to make one video talking about all of the 12, I think, guys that are mentioned there, because a lot of these guys are some pretty high-profile names, and so I would rather make several videos going super in-depth with those situations rather than making one video that's, 15 minutes long where I only spend a minute and a half on each of them, because I like going super deep with the topics. I think anybody who's watched the videos kind of knows that. So today we're going over another name that was indeed mentioned on Craig Custance's article, but as always, The Athletic is paid for content, so we're going over onto TVA Sports because what they did was they actually compiled the full-on list of all the guys who were over here and who were mentioned as a part of the agent survey as to who they believe could be traded. And one of them, with 3 votes out of all the guys who were asked to vote, was Mitch Marner. Now, if you go over onto NHLTradeRumors.me, they have themselves an actual quote that is put out in the article that is speaking about Mitch Marner, and it brings up an entirely other idea that I also wanted to talk about in this video here too. So the first idea is whether or not Mitch Marner could get traded, which is something we have discussed before, but coming over with a different idea over here kind of gives out a different perspective. This is what the agents who were interviewed brought up, and they made some decent points. I'd say Mitch Marner. They should not have signed John Tavares. Tavares' skating is declining every year. They should have just focused on the 2 younger kids and used the money elsewhere. I know it's great to have the 2 centers, but you can't have 3 players making over $10 million. One of the big names on the Leafs, I'm not 100% sure. They might trade one of the big 3. So, Marner is the guy who I'm talking about here in this video because he is probably the easiest punching bag in a discussion like this, where you take a look at the potential of trading one of the big 3. Now, who exactly are the big 3? Matthews, Marner, Tavares. These guys are all making over $10 million. Their AAVs are right here on the screen. Matthews, $11.634 million until 2024. Tavares, a solid $11 until 2025. And Mitch Marner with a $10.893 million salary until 2025 as well. The only one with a no-move clause is indeed their captain, John Tavares. But the idea that was brought up in that little tidbit from the NHL scout who was surveyed is the idea as to whether or not Tavares himself was a mistake, and whether or not the Maple Leafs would have been in better hands if they had not done that contract. Now, before we dive deep into that discussion, let's start things off with a little bit of a caveat. First off, the Toronto Maple Leafs, you take their roster, take out John Tavares. Are they a worse team? Yes. John Tavares is a player who ultimately does make your team better, and there is no question about it. A team with Tavares is much better than the same team without Tavares. The problem with John Tavares is indeed the contract and the overall role that he takes on that team. Not because he's bad, but because the Toronto Maple Leafs already had arguably 2 other franchise-defining players in Marner and Austin Matthews, and a very elite point producer in William Nylander as well, whom are all kind of being divided in a different way now that John Tavares has entered the picture. It's why an NHL agent has come out here and said that they should not have signed Tavares, who is indeed declining in terms of his overall talent to skate every year. His contract goes until he's 35 years old, and he's making $11 million. Sure, he got 90 points the previous few years. He's great, but there still is that whole idea that you have to take a look at. So, overall, starting things off with the Marner idea, though. Mitch Marner is indeed somebody who has been in the trade discussions before, not because Kyle Dubas has been shopping Marner, but because Toronto Maple Leafs fans have been calling for several people's heads over the past few months, and it was a lot more prevalent earlier in the year, especially after they got eliminated by Columbus. But one of the big names that was discussed in that little talk was Mitch Marner, because for a big portion of the Columbus series, he wasn't really producing. Up until the big miracle 3-0 down comeback game where Mitch Marner had, I think it was 3 assists or something, 3 points, something like that. That's kind of when Toronto Maple Leafs fans just turned the bipolar switch back on, and they were like, okay, we love Marner again, and then he didn't get any points in the next game, and then they were like, okay, trade him. We made a video about that, the love-hate relationship between Mitch Marner and the Toronto Maple Leafs fan base, and a lot of that did have to do with the overall idea of what we're just going to call in this video, heart. Because we knew that Mitch Marner was a guy who grew up as a Leafs fan. We knew that he had the whole kind of sleeping in the pajamas kind of story as well. A guy who grew up in Ontario and who wanted to play for his hometown team. And everybody knew that if he had himself this love for the Leafs, he could be that hometown superstar that took a discount to play with his favorite team. But he wasn't that. The negotiations were ugly. We all kind of knew what was going on with the media leaking things out there. There was his dad getting involved in at least the perspective of a lot of fans who were taking a look at what was going on. And a lot of people were saying, okay, sure, he has the right to ask for all this money because at the end of the day, he is very good. But what kind of overall impact is that going to leave with the fan base? So Marner was in that weird spot. Eventually there was the whole, okay, he wasn't really producing in the playoffs element coming into it as well, which is why a lot of Leafs fans were harping on the trade Marner side of things. And you know what? If you said to me that a Marner trade would indeed be something that Kyle Dubas would consider, I honestly could see it. And it's mostly just because Marner is a player whose overall value to the team is indeed something that other players on the team also bring. That is point production, that is solid playmaking, that is goals coming into your lineup. And we know this about the Maple Leafs. It's been said several times throughout different media outlets, but the Maple Leafs don't have a lot of balance. They have a lot of really nice skilled players, a lot of guys who can put up points and dangle the pants off of you, but when it comes to the overall game that encapsulates every aspect of hockey, physical play, grindy play, defensive coverage, shutdown play, two-way ability, the Maple Leafs are a one-dimensional team in that aspect. And that's not to say they don't have players who are exhibiting two-way capabilities, it's just their strengths lie very much so in the offensive part of the game. The flashy, skilled, overall goal-scoring, assist playmaking part of the game. And you can say, okay, well, hockey is a game where you score goals, so why is it bad that they have a whole bunch of people on their goal-scoring side? And that's not a bad thing, it's just a thing that I do indeed think is the truth. That there is somewhat of a lack of balance and that the Maple Leafs do indeed have a part of their roster that they can improve on. They have tried to do that over this previous offseason with some nice gritty guys like Wayne Simmonds coming onto the team, but we're at a point where we haven't seen yet how exactly that's going to go down. It could be very positive, it could be very negative. Obviously, it's more than just Wayne Simmonds. There are a lot of nice acquisitions the Maple Leafs ended up making. Bogosian's a nice one as well. Brody on your blue line also helps you out tremendously. So there indeed are other aspects of the Leafs that have been worked on, but we have gotten word otherwise that the Maple Leafs might indeed just be done. But for Mitch Marner specifically, the fact that you already have a John Tavares on your team that kind of took over as the guy to carry the load behind Austin Matthews or side by side with Austin Matthews. It's no longer Marner and Matthews, it's Matthews, Tavares, and Marner. So there's this whole idea as to whether or not a Marner trade, if you can get the right pieces back, could help your team out more than just a Mitch Marner would, considering the fact that you already have John Tavares, who is going on until 2035 with $11 million too. There's a very big element here that says that John Tavares is playing the best hockey of his life, and going into the long-term future, who knows how you're going to be able to afford everybody else around that if you have a declining Tavares with a Matthews, with a Marner, and with the other guys that you're going to need to re-sign as well. Frederik Andersen enters that conversation. So To me, I can understand when an NHL agent says that signing Tavares was a mistake, just from the overall asset management point of view going into the long term. Do I dismiss the idea that Tavares makes the Maple Leafs better today? Absolutely not. He is a great player. He makes the Leafs better, but long term, who knows what's going to happen when you have a 35-year-old John Tavares and a 28-year-old Mitch Marner on your squad at the same time. We noted this in a video a few months ago, but John Tavares went from a team that was down in the dumps to a team that eventually couldn't do any more than when he was added on, and the team that he was on before started doing very well after he left too, so the irony there is very, very strong. But talk to me in the comments what you think, though. Do you think Marner does have the capacity of getting traded? Some NHL agents out there do believe so. And further to that discussion, do you believe that the John Tavares signing was in part a mistake if you take a look at the long-term vision of the Maple Leafs and the players they have under their belt today? I'm very interested in hearing your responses because that is indeed a very loaded question, and I know some Leafs fans are going to get super defensive, others are going to get super aggressive and cynical about it, so I'm here for that, but indeed it does kind of scare me a little bit, to be honest. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Troll99, comment down below what you think, and bye.